I have had the most wonderful pleasure of speaking with Jamie Walker on today's episode about creating healthy work boundaries. I know so many of you in the workplace feel like you're stretched so thin that you cannot meet your work demands and also take care of yourself. And in conversations that I've had with clients, many of the work demands that are being asked of them are really beyond what is reasonable. So I invited Jamie to come on to Blasphemous Nutrition to talk about how we can begin to take back our life and our autonomy in the workplace in a way that, isn't going to necessarily get us kicked out because having a job's important, right? And as an ICF associated certified life and mind rebel coach, Jamie helps her clients ease their minds so that they can live from their hearts. You will gather from listening to her that she is wildly in love with life and not one to shy from doing the inner work herself. She considers herself a transformational warrior and helps her clients reconnect with their authentic selves and see their dreams in a whole new light and gain the confidence to go after them. Our conversation is, like Jamie, very deep, luscious, juicy. There's a lot of wonderful nuggets of wisdom and food for thought in today's episode. I am certain that whether you work for yourself or you work in the corporate culture or you work with people in the corporate culture, there are gems for you to take away from our conversation today. So sit back, buckle up, and let's move on into it. Hey, Rebels. Welcome to Blasphemous Nutrition. Consider this podcast your pantry full of clarity, perspective, and the nuance needed to counter the superficial health advice so freely given on the internet. I'm Aimee, the unapologetically candid host of Blasphemous Nutrition and a double-degreed nutritionist with 20 years experience. I'm here to share a more nuanced take on living and eating well to sustain and recover your health. If you've found most health advice to be so generic as to be meaningless, or so extreme that it's unrealistic, and you don't mind the occasional F-bomb, you've come to the right place. From dissecting the latest nutrition trends to breaking down published research and sharing my own clinical experiences, I'm on a mission to foster clarity amidst all the confusion and empower you to have the health you need to live a life you love. Now let's get started. Jamie Walker, welcome to Blasphemous Nutrition. I'm so excited
Thanks.
to have you here.
Oh, Aimee, I'm so glad to be here and I'm so excited for this conversation.
So I was really thrilled to find you and to bring you in because of the pervasiveness of, I wouldn't even say blurred, but absent work-life boundaries that I've seen with my clients, particularly since the pandemic kicked off and people were working from home. And all of our traditional, typical breaks that were built in, like getting in the car and leaving, or going to the bathroom between meetings, like these kind of evaporated. And for a lot of my clients, there's been this increasing unwritten expectation that they are available 24/7, that they really dedicate their lives to the key performance indicators and return on investments that are set by their team, that are set by their management. And it's recurringly brought up as a major obstacle that gets in the way of them being able to consistently exercise, prepare meals for themselves, even take the time to eat a meal during the workday. So I was hoping that you could really help us find ways to reclaim the foundation of our lives and health from our employers, so that for my clients and for listeners, so that they can kind of push back against that cultural norm to reclaim the time and energy for themselves to keep their health intact because the consequences have been literally loss of health. And in a culture where everyone around you is working and working, and the expectation is you are there. The expectation is if your boss sends an email, you respond to it, even if it's a weekend, even if it's in the evening, even if you're out having an anniversary dinner with your spouse, right? Like you show up. How can people push back against that in a way that
Oh,
doesn't feel like they're going to lose their job, especially in these
yeah.
sectors where things are uncertain?
Yeah. Yeah. And for those of the who are just listening, and if there's no video, my smile right there was a very strained smile because it is like as we're discussing this, I'm getting all those feelings. It's like, oof, it is rough.
It is.
And and I think I know that there is a way, and it's not going to look like everybody else's way.
Mm,
And one thing that we need to bring into this conversation is discernment, is because what I may say might not feel right for you, might not feel right for a listener, might not. So that's kind of that's always my first thing when we're talking about boundaries or lack of boundaries, because my boundary is going to look different than your boundary and vice versa.
right.
But you're right. So if they're feeling like this pressure, and the truth is that we live in the real friggin' world.
Got to
We
pay
we
the bill.
we got to pay the bills. This is whether you believe in we're a post capitalism or we're in a capitalistic world. Like we're there. This is the truth.
Yeah.
And so I think the first thing is about noticing what is happening to you, because when we're feeling that, when we get that email like you said on at a dinner or at night, and we're feeling the urge, that's a response. Like, we're just feeling that urge to respond, and then we're looking at our world and we're just responding to everything. We're not actually internalizing any of it.
Mm, yeah.
Your body is. Let me be clear about that. Your body's internalizing that stress, but your mind's on response mode. So I think the first step in all of this is finding space in your day. And I know how hard that can sound. Even a minute to just have a deep breath is the start of finding that space for yourself.
Mm. Do and spend a little extra time in the bathroom than I need to.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah,
people are not going to barge in and bother you there still, thankfully, I hope.
right, right. What is that meme that was floating around the internet? Boss makes a dollar, I make a dime, so I shed on company time. And I remember being when I was in the corporate world, I was like, yeah, that was real.
Oh my
Why
God.
not?
Why not?
That's just it.
Yeah.
And I love that idea of like, because you're the bathroom. You're right. It's a private space. You're
Unless
sitting
you're
there.
working at home and you have children at home, and then there are no private spaces. But for many
Yeah. Yeah.
for many people, they can still claim the bathroom as a private space to take an extra
Yeah.
minute.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. Just start there and just start noticing what is happening. Because your body's going to tell you. What our
Mhm.
goal is as coaches is to get our clients to understand what their body is telling them before the stress takes over and ends up in the hospital.
Yeah.
Because that is the alternative if you don't start taking time. It's not to scare anybody.
But it is. It
Hmm.
is. I mean, I've not directly, but tertiarily, like witnessed that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, of course, once you start taking that space and that time, it gets easier. And that's all we're talking about. We're talking about, there's no point in being like, oh my God, I need to meditate for 20 minutes every morning. If you've never done it, you're first of all, your brain's gonna go over and go like, oh shit, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's going to actually automatically try and like sabotage you because it's not used to it. So we can't be doing that. So when we take like small steps, we'll actually get you much further.
And for those who have taken a moment, or maybe they have gotten sick and moments have been given to them to
Hmm.
reflect,
Yeah.
and they realize this is not sustainable. I'm feeling burned out, or I'm approaching burnout, or oh gosh, I actually achieved burnout last year and kept going,
Hmm.
but I feel stuck, I feel trapped because if I am going to keep my job on this team where people are being laid off, if I am going to have a chance to, to potentially increase, my position, my pay, get a bonus, what have you, I have to show up. How can they do that without sacrificing their health in the process? I feel that's where everybody feels like they're at, is between that rock and a hard place. How can they
Yeah.
change their experience within a company culture that presents itself in this way as being normal, appropriate, and how things are going to be?
The thing that comes to mind right now is the the idea of if you're not showing up, you know, let's say 75 to 100% you in your job, you're not showing up fully who you are as a worker. So therefore, you're actually potentially sacrificing any advancement
Mm,
because you're going there. So we hear about leaders in the space talking, especially in the tech world and the corporate world, we hear the things that move the needle. If you're stuck in that burnout and response mode, you're just doing whatever's coming your way. You're not paying attention to what's actually moving the needle for the company. So therefore, you're not going to be in a position where they're going to say, let's promote this person.
right.
There's also the other risk of if you're somebody that is responding and supporting everybody else around you, let's keep that person in that space. They're doing a wonderful job of supporting me. Why would I want to lose that person?
Mm,
And that's not to say that not to be bad at your job. That's not it at all. But that is the reason why we need to take time to ourselves so that we can calm our minds, see what the bigger picture is, understand what's happening, and check in with ourselves. And that's going to also help us decide what tasks really do need to be done. And sometimes in the corporate world, we do need to push back.
which,
When we look at, we're all humans.
yeah.
We we all sit to shit. So regardless of who your boss is, they're a human. They're going to make mistakes and things of that nature.
Mhm. How do we begin to push back?
I think it starts with some really big confidence in yourself, giving yourself that support. And I
Mm.
always like to do this thing with my clients where we go, okay, you're going to do something really scary, push back. Especially if you're somebody that like identifies as a people pleaser, responding to everything that comes through. Like this is scary stuff, and like it's
It
it,
pushes at the
it's
core.
it does, it truly does.
Yeah.
And so, okay, what support can I give myself and the confidence that I need to start to push back? Pushing back is not rude. That's the other thing. We need people to understand that pushing back is not rude, it's not demeaning, it's not bad in any way, unless you decided to use certain language. That's a different story. But I think understanding what your role is, understanding what your capacity is currently, are all things that are going to be able to help support you to push back. I would love the idea of, in the corporate world, taking a look at, okay, so you have a new task that is added to your plate, and you realize you're past, you're over capacity. And let's be real, like we need to go back, we need to focus on that. What is that, you know, not necessarily 9 to 5, but like a couple of, what are your hours in your day? Whether it's like, could be, you could be even 12 to 8 for, that doesn't matter. But like, what is the amount that you're able to give that you are contractually obligated to give your company?
I
Yeah.
think a lot of people work beyond what is on contract, and no one is forcing you, right? But
No.
the culture of the workplace holds this unwritten expectation.
Yeah. And culture that holds that unwritten expectation, you are not the only one who feels that pressure. You are not the only one in that company who is upset by this. And you are not alone. And I think hearing that is important. Doesn't mean run to HR, doesn't mean to gossip, doesn't mean, but just knowing that if that's the culture that is being set, that is a suppressive culture that the majority of humans will not be able to grow in. And you need to make a decision then. Are you are you able to, okay, we have to work. We have to work. Do we have to earn money? Do I put this job then on a lower priority in my life so that I still make the money? I put it in the parameters of my 9 to 5. And then there's other things in my life that are of a higher priority to me. There are people out there that can do that.
Mhm.
You are not meant to come to this earth to work. And
I
the
know
other thing,
there are Puritans that would disagree with you.
I get it. I completely understand that there's many that would disagree with that. And some people might be like, well, making artists work, you know, but we did come here to create.
Mhm.
We didn't necessarily come here to work.
I love that distinction.
The other thing that I always love to say is, I mean, this goes for a large chunk of the population. There is a small chunk of the population that, when we look at healthcare and everything like that, but chances are you're not saving babies. You not answering that email or putting your family first or doing what is best for you in that moment that is outside that 9 to 5 obligation is not going to put anybody out. You're not going to put anyone, there's not going to be something that completely crumbles and falls apart because you did that. And oftentimes when we're in response mode, that's what we think.
Yes. Yes. And when everyone is in response mode, that's what everyone thinks.
Yeah.
It's so hard to step out of that because everyone else is in it as well.
But could you imagine that if you decide to step out of that, the leader you would be in your company, guaranteed, like I said, you're not the only one that's feeling this, and you have the chance to become an example.
Yes. I have been working with someone and we've been having these conversations over the last year. And she is well established in her career, is in a very high performance, high demand sector. And she was butting up against, her need to take care of her health versus the company culture, which was definitely creating burnout and stress that was really manifesting itself in her body and how it was able to perform in sport and other things.
Yeah.
And she started setting boundaries. And she started putting her health first and putting what she needed to do for herself first. And sending out emails saying, I will not respond to email after this time. I will get back to it at the earliest convenience at this time. And I remember her saying that what she was doing was having a positive influence on her boss, who was notorious for overworking, burning out, like just, super nice guy, but just totally sacrificing himself. Right. And I also remember having conversations with her about that very thing of you are in a position as a woman in this field, which is male dominated, to show up in this way and teach those who are coming after you, who are being mentored by you, that it can be different. And I feel it really does take one brave person to begin to change the culture of a team or a department, which then can create a ripple effect that changes the culture of at least a small company, if not a huge multinational conglomerate.
And when you look at that ripple effect, and I love that your client is stepping into that because you're right. Not only is she affecting her coworkers and clearly her boss, she's affecting those people's families too in a positive light.
Yes.
We're as humans we don't always see the full effects of that ripple, but it touches more than just the people directly around you. When you decide to support yourself and create those boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's in a position where she's got the seniority to do that without feeling feeling like her career was on the line. I wonder how someone who is not yet established, who is kind of fighting their way up the corporate ladder, as it were, how they might be able to do that differently. But I have also heard that Gen Z is refusing to even take it on, that they're,
Yeah.
and I don't work with many people in that demographic. So that's hearsay as
Yeah,
far
yeah.
as far as I know. I haven't heard it straight from the horse's mouth, as it were, but it is my understanding that, maybe that will end with that generation. And that would be fantastic.
Yeah. I do have the pleasure of working with some Gen Zs. And
Okay, tell me.
oh my gosh, they are an incredible group. They are incredibly hardworking for things they believe in.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And yeah, I work with some Gen Z entrepreneurs who are ready to make an incredible positive change in the workforce. And I also work with some Gen Zs who are in the corporate world. And they're very good at their job. They'll go and they'll do it. They'll find the most efficient, best, smartest way to do their job because they grew up in that technology era.
Right.
And that's it. That's you just have to let them do that. They believe in equality. They believe in a living wage, and they believe in having the conditions that are not going to be suppressing them at work. So I think we're going to continue to see a big shift in the workplace culture. And anytime, millennials came through, and I remember when I entered the workforce too, I was like constantly battling with that. Okay, I need to answer everything to work up the ladder, plus I need to take care of myself. I remember that, but I do remember still pushing back a little bit.
Are you a
And
millennial?
I am a millennial.
Okay. I'm Gen
Yeah.
X. Not Gen
Very, yes. So yeah, so as and I love my Gen Xers that started this, they started this trend of F the system in these brilliant, beautiful ways and allowed me to step in and continue pushing the boundaries. And the millennials made way for our Gen Zs to continue doing it.
Yeah. That's so exciting
Um,
to hear.
it is very exciting, and change is messy. Like we're going through this,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
change is very messy and it's hard.
Hmm.
And we're
Hmm.
like, we're just at the beginning of it. That's the other thing. I was like, we're talking about three generations here. That's not very long in the span of like when we look at history.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, in my mind, I'm seeing this convergence of this shift from the workers demanding to have a life, um, butting up against these big behemoth systems that are so huge but so fragile. And I think we've really, in the past 4 years, have become aware of how fragile the system is and
Yeah.
how one tiny little virus can just, cause all the cracks to show and
Yeah.
the impact that that has. And
Yeah.
so I'm in my mind, I'm seeing this force of this generation that won't ever take on the mantle to then have to dismantle it, right? And they're going
Yeah.
to butt up against these systems that depend upon people's sacrifice of their lives, and it's just gonna
Yep.
fall apart is what it
Yeah.
feels like. But that's how change feels, right? Like things are falling apart.
I think you nailed it. D- These big companies or a company or companies, some companies depend on the sacrifice of their workers to
They
exist.
do. They do. Absolutely. The only way that you can get quarter over quarter growth is through massive sacrifice. And it is not happening. I mean, it's not happening for the bulk of the shareholders, right? It's happening at the provider level, it's happening at the team level, it's happening, at the programmer level, it's happening with the folks who are boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And the mass exodus that has been happening in in medical. I mean, in medical, people are like, F it, I'm leaving.
Right.
In tech, people are getting laid off, but it's just there's so much disruption. And and so I feel encouraged because it's like, okay, those who are coming after us are, if anything, not going to repeat this pattern, right? They're already pushing against it at the beginning of their career.
Hmm.
I kind of interpret that to mean that as someone who would be well established in my career, that also gives me a little bit more leeway to start saying no, even if it means I'm not answering emails after 6 p.m. Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
That one thing, that one change.
Yeah.
And then maybe, you know, us Gen Xers, the older millennials, maybe we don't have to finish our career completely physically destroyed.
Yeah. That would be, and I love the fact that of you painting that picture because I do believe that that is where we can head.
Oh,
We can
absolutely.
go.
Yeah.
And then we have our beautiful Gen Alphas afterwards that you guys have ever dealt with the Gen Alpha. They're like little honey badgers. Um, that's a whole other story. Um, who are definitely not going to take the the BS.
Hmm.
And I wanted to, you said something about these companies that are so fragile, and I wanted to take that back because something popped when you were saying that. What do we tell kids when they get bullied? Well, one, now we're telling them like that's not okay. You don't need to take that. Two, we also, as we get older, we start to learn how fragile that bully is.
Right. Yeah.
And I just want to leave that for listeners just as a seed planted. If you're feeling bullied at work, either by somebody or by the workplace culture, bullying is always rooted in fragility.
Hmm. Yeah. And it definitely is. It is definitely driven by fear.
Hmm.
In the workplace culture, it's driven by fear. because there's always someone up higher who's going to get their undies wadded in a bunch if things don't look a certain way. And that fear, like that's the trickle down effect.
Yeah. Yeah. That totally, the fear is the trickle down effect. It's not economics.
Not economics, no. Is the fear that trickles down, folks.
Mm,
Yeah.
mhm. But if you're someone that is noticing that and getting that pushback, those are your emotions telling you that something's not right here. And your emotions are going to be telling you that because you have the power to do something different.
Yes. Yeah.
And that might be the smallest little voice inside you at first, but you wouldn't be feeling uncomfortable if you did not have the power to change because your body would tell you, we're going to keep going. We're in survival mode. Like, we're fine. But if you actually take that minute on the toilet and tap into your body and your emotions, they are going to actually be able to help you navigate these situations.
Yeah. Do you have any other wise words of wisdom or practical tips for people to to begin to act subversively as an act of self-preservation?
I think when you show up in your, and even just a smidgen of your authenticity in the workplace, like you said, there is a ripple effect that is created and you can change. You are changing people without you even noticing.
Mm.
You are changing without even noticing. The other thing. And I think the other big thing is to be gracious with yourself.
What does that look like?
That looks like throughout this process, you're going to mess up. You might not get the response that you actually needed. You very well might be fired or laid off when you start this process. But anything that is a rejection is actually a divine redirection. It is giving you that space to find a better fit for
Mm.
you. And yes, we live in the real world. The stresses of money are a real thing. But being stressed in an environment that is incredibly toxic, that because at that point, if you are changing and you are trying to encourage healthy boundaries and you then be laid off, that is an environment that is choosing to stay toxic.
Oh, that's an interesting point. Yeah. Yeah.
Often, or oftentimes in the workplace culture, it's often, um, it's very, it can be ignorant. People don't realize it until they see something different. But if you're showing up and you're doing that differently, yeah, it's choosing to stay toxic. It's choosing to exploit its workers. Do you really want to stay there?
Mm. Yeah. It reminds me of a story my husband told me. He's in the tech sector, and he relayed to me a story about someone who had left a job. I don't remember why, and accepted a position for less pay because it was a better work environment. And and this was someone for whom leaving a job was not, he's at the tail end of his career. He's in his 50s in tech. A guy in his 50s in tech is not guaranteed to get another job. Like, risky move. And he was able to find a different job. The pay was not as high. However, he feels happier. He feels more in alignment with where he wants to be with his work because of that change.
And I
And
bet you he's doing better work because of it.
oh yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah.
His output has increased.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. And if that's a value, if you do value the work that you do and the performance that you do offer, that becomes an important consideration. I mean, some people don't care, right? They just clock in, clock out. They're not, it's a means to an end. And that's
Yeah,
fine
yeah,
too.
that's
That's fine
fine.
too. But yeah.
Yeah. So for the listeners that, if there's anything that resonated, especially when it comes to talking about emotions, talking about tapping back in, I'm offering all your listeners my workbook. And it's actually navigating and working with your emotions
Oh,
because
fantastic.
they are the key to navigating this world and navigating your world in general. So it is going to be free for your listeners with the code blasphemous nutrition. And I'll send you the link and all the information for that. So it's and it's not a very big workbook. And it's actually it's a 3-step program of listening to your emotions, letting them, feeling them, and then discovering their wisdom at the end of it. Because I'm somebody who intellectualized her feelings, who knew like why I was feeling, but never felt them. But once I started feeling them, I got some really good guidance and things started shifting and changing in my world. So my brain needs to know there's a carrot at the end. So this is
Yeah.
for all of my other intellectualizers, this workbook. So
That's so generous of you. Thank you. Thank you for that gift.
it's my pleasure.
One last question before we wrap up, Jamie. What is something that is blasphemous about you?
Well, there's a lot. I feel like there's probably stuff even in this conversation. Um, I think probably in our world, in our culture, in our society, the most blasphemous thing about me is I wholeheartedly believe in the power of people showing up authentically in our world. And I support many people in doing so. And I know that it scares people because, we're removing control. But I think that is the way forward in this world.
How do you feel that is blasphemous?
I think it's actually going very much against our societal norms of that
Mm,
fitting in culture.
right. Okay. I'm seeing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm over here going like, you know what? Let's rebel against this.
Mhm.
Let's step out of line and create and see what else is out there for us. Because like I said, you came here to create. You didn't come here to work.
Awesome. With that mic drop moment, I want to thank you so much for joining us today, for the
Thank you
lovely
so much.
conversation and all the valuable little nuggets of wisdom that you have shared with us.
Thank you so much, Aimee. It was a blast to have this conversation.
So I'll have the link to the book in the show notes. And Jamie, if people want to reach out to you, are you on the socials? Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at WalkerXOXO. You can also find me on TikTok, and you can find me on my website, which is walkercoaching.ca.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Jamie.
Thank you. Take care.
If you have found some nuggets of wisdom, make sure to subscribe, rate, and share Blasphemous Nutrition with those you care about. As you navigate the labyrinth of health advice out there, remember, health is a journey, not a dietary dictatorship. Stay skeptical, stay daring, and challenge the norms that no longer serve you. If you've got burning questions or want to share your own flavor of rebellion, slide into my DMs. Your stories fuel me, and I love hearing them. Thanks again for tuning into Blasphemous Nutrition. Until next time, this is Aimee signing off, reminding you that truth is nuanced and any dish can be made better with a little bit of sass.